Welcome to Downtown Sports. My name is Downtown Stephen Brown, and in today's video, guys, we got a lot to go over. Now, if this is the first you're hearing of the tweet that's up on the screen right now, you might be surprised. But if you watch the video that I put out about a week ago or so detailing all the different scenarios in which Frederik Andersen could return to the Toronto Maple Leafs before the end of the regular season and get in a couple of games, this doesn't surprise you. In the Leafs placing Frederik Andersen on a long-term injury reserve conditioning stint would also not be something that would surprise you if you were watching these videos in and around the trade deadline. We talked about that back then as something the Maple Leafs were more than likely going to do. And a couple of you tagged me in this Chris Johnson tweet here, which I thought was funny. Thank you guys for letting me know. But going back to this first one here, is this for Riley Nash, like Earl suggested down below, or is it for Frederik Andersen? So understanding an LTIR conditioning stint is the first point of this, because like Chris pointed out, I don't think that this is for Frederik Andersen. I think that this is for Riley Nash. And the reason behind that is that the loan lasts for up to 6 days and 3 games, whichever one comes first. And if the team feels that the player needs it, they can ask for a 2-game extension. Frederik Andersen just started this conditioning stint a couple of days ago and has only played in half a game in the American Hockey League. They're going to take this as far as they possibly can. They're not going to shortchange him any games whatsoever. I think, like Earl pointed out, that this is for Riley Nash. And if we take a look at the numbers and what we know up until this point, we can figure out how and why. So to make this easier to explain, or to explain it better, the cap-friendly armchair GM calculates cap space and the true cap hit when you have players on LTIR incorrectly. If I just place them on LTIR, when I place them on LTIR, it subtracts their cap hit, and that's not what happens at all. When you place a player on LTIR, it allows you to spend over the salary cap, so it is increasing your upper limit that you're allowed to spend while that player is injured. So when the Maple Leafs placed Freddie Andersen on LTIR, you don't subtract his $5 million. You add his $5 million to the $81.5 million ceiling. And now that is the new potential cap ceiling that the Maple Leafs have to spend up to in order to replace said player. So the Leafs, with these 3 players on LTIR, can spend or have a cap hit, this number here, up to $88.2 million. If they were sending Rasmus Sandin and the rest of the players that are eligible to clear through waivers down for the purpose to activate Frederik Andersen from his long-term injury reserve conditioning stint, the money wouldn't work. Their new cap ceiling with Bogosian, Sabrin, and Riley Nash still on LTIR would be $85.95 million, and this active roster has a cap hit of $87.599 million with a centerman missing. Now, you might be able to pull this off if you placed Zach Hyman on LTIR retroactive to their 10th last game in the regular season, and they would be able to do that because he was injured prior to that date. But you would be over this $88.2 million number if you called up Adam Brooks, and the Maple Leafs don't really have anyone cheaper than him. You might be able to get away with it under an emergency recall, under an emergency basis, or the league might just make you play shorthanded like they did with the Vegas Golden Knights earlier in the year. But you don't really want to force that on your guys going into the playoffs playing a man down. And you also don't want to just start putting guys on waivers because you don't want to run the risk of anyone getting claimed heading into the playoffs, because that nullifies the depth, right? You don't want to lose Pierre Engvall to waivers, even if you don't like him. He's a penalty killer, someone who can play center. You don't want to lose a guy like David Riddick. That's the entire reason why you traded for him, was to have 3 goalies. And it's also worth noting that both Riley Nash and Zach Hyman have been practicing in red non-contact sweaters. So if Riley Nash is ready to return, I know when Zach Hyman was injured, they mentioned about a 2-week or so minimum period that he would be injured. So there's a possibility that both of those guys can be back. But there is only 3 games remaining in the year, and there's only so much time. And I'm pretty sure I already mentioned this, but if you're saying to yourself, why can't they just place Nick Foligno on LTIR and exceed the cap even more? And it's because he didn't get injured prior to them having at least 10 games left in the season. He got injured after the fact. And because he did, that niche rule that would apply to Zach Hyman doesn't with him. And if you're sitting there saying to yourself, what are you making such a big fuss over Riley Nash for? And it's because Riley Nash is one of the better bottom 6 defensive centermen in the entire NHL. He has been for years now. And it's also because, well, if you want my opinion, Alex Kerfoot is not a shutdown centerman. I don't think that Keefe views him as one either. There was a game earlier in the season, I believe, against Montreal, and before the game, Sheldon Keefe made the decision to move Kerfoot up in the lineup, to play him with Tavares and Nylander, who were Kerfoot's most common line mates all of last season. When he was asked if he would consider doing that more often or making it something permanent, he said no, and he shut it down right away. But I don't think that's because he loved Alex Kerfoot being his shutdown centerman. No, we've seen Pierre Engvall linger around this team a lot. And that's not because Sheldon Keefe loves the guy either. He's put Pierre Engvall in the doghouse repeated times this year. Alex Kerfoot has been the Maple Leafs' shutdown center this year because Sheldon Keefe has felt that he's had no one else. And Kyle Dubas went out there and got Sheldon Keefe, one of the better bottom six shutdown centermen in the entire league. You don't think he's going to use him? You don't think he's going to fall in love with this guy? But what does that mean for Alex Kerfoot? Especially when guys like Nick Foligno and Zach Hyman come back from injury. And for the love of God, do not stay on the fourth line next to Jason Spezza and Joe Thornton. We saw that for over 10 games earlier in the season, and it was a complete disaster. And you got to be careful with these with and without heat map stats, because they're not contextualized at all. These heat maps show, and the numbers and the percentages, show that the Leafs are a better team when Kerfoot's on the bench rather than when he's on the ice. There's very little context to these stats, but if you want to perpetuate a narrative, knock yourself out. He's not producing any offense because he's playing on the shutdown line with guys who aren't necessarily known for their skating, playmaking ability, or their shot. And the Leafs defensively look worse with him on the ice compared to without him, because this is comparing players that have easier defensive assignments, or none at all. But I'm not going to defend Kerfoot any more than I already have, because it's not like he's been good. I just don't think it's fair to say that he's been bad. He's a middle six scoring winger. He's not a centerman, and he's not a shutdown centerman. He just happens to be a player who's versatile, and the Maple Leafs are taking advantage of that because they don't have anyone else. But now they do. I'm not going to get too caught up into it in this video because I don't want it to be too long, and that's not what the point of this video was. Just wanted to detail why they sent Rasmus Sandin down when he's been one of our best defenders over the last couple weeks. And I really don't feel like making a fuss about a guy in Kerfoot. He's going to be gone in the offseason anyway, either to Seattle or in a trade, because they can't afford to have even a shutdown centerman making $3.5 million, never mind a middle six scoring winger. But in the meantime, he's a pretty good depth piece to have. He can play on your power play, he can play on the penalty kill, he can play center, he can play up in the lineup, but he just cannot play with Jason Spezza and Joe Thornton, so don't you dare put us through that, Sheldon Keefe. And while I think it's true to say that depth is not a problem, I think it's a bit of a cop-out in this situation, because if you're watching this channel, and this video specifically, you want an answer. You don't want to hear that depth is a good problem to have. You want to know who deserves to play on the fourth line, who deserves to play on the third line. You want specific names is why you're here. So if you want specific names is what you'll get on Sunday. I'm going to do a video arguing the pros and cons for all of the fringe players on this roster on why they deserve to play in the lineup and why they maybe might get benched. And then by the end of that video, I will give you the names that I think are going to be benched and the names that I think that are going to be in the lineup. And with 3 games remaining, we're going to find out pretty soon who's going to be in that lineup for round 1, game 1. So make sure to like the video if you did like it and subscribe for more, because more is always on the way. Guys, make sure to leave me a like on this video if you made it this far into the video, and also comment Ilya Mikheyev in the comments section. Let's get a lot of people confused that didn't make it all the way through this one. And if you don't understand the joke, I guess you just don't understand the joke.